Welcome to the Responding to Climate Change webcast here in the main exhibition hall in Durban at COP17. Delighted to say I'm joined by two men with me to talk about the future, perhaps the future ways to deal with climate change. Harry Verhart from Philips Lighting, welcome Harry, and Stefan Schurig from the World Future Council Foundation. Welcome to you, Stefan, too. Harry, let's start with you. What have Philips been doing? What have Philips Lighting been doing to sort of mitigate carbon emissions around the world?
Now we have a global program to switch to energy efficient lighting, and so we do a lot in, let's say, in terms of value chain, so communicating benefits of better solutions, but also we have a branch in those activities on engaging with public stakeholders, so policy frameworks that are needed. But most of all, particularly at COP17, we are here to share the good news that we are at a tipping point in the LED lighting revolution. So now new applications exist of new solutions for all applications, be it retail, be it office, be it street lighting. And apart from the carbon and the monetary savings that are really key, certainly carbon savings protecting climate change, there are a lot of social benefits. So we see their momentum picking up, and this is going to be an exciting world going forward.
Just a quick one. How many tons of carbon can you save by having efficient lighting? Do you have any statistics you can throw at us?
Yes, certainly. So lighting consumes about 19% of global electricity, and 2/3 of the installed lighting base is inefficient. So if we switch globally to energy efficient lighting, it saves 40% of energy. That's 130 billion euros in energy, but also 670 million tons of carbon dioxide. So quite a bit. We're part of the solution. So we need to do this really together.
Stefan, in terms of policy making, where does the World Future Foundation stand? Where do you think that governments around the world are at the moment in terms of low carbon policy making?
Well, that's two questions. Where are the governments standing at the moment? I think what we hear from the UNFCCC summit at the moment is a very dragging process, and governments unfortunately are not really committed to a binding agreement to reduce carbon emissions. But likewise, the private sector has matured dramatically its endeavors on shrinking CO2, and I think that's really remarkable. Philips is one example, Siemens is another example. So we have sort of these two worlds here. One world trying to commit to a binding agreement, which seems to be very dragging, very difficult, and the most proactive sector from some parts of the private sector world having these great achievements already in place. We as the World Future Council, we're trying to help to accelerate this process for investments in green technologies and carbon neutral technologies, and therefore we're identifying good policies that have proved successful, and then we'll campaign for that.
Are those good policies mainly ones like feed-in tariffs? Obviously we've seen the success those have had in Germany. Is it as simple as saying we should have feed-in tariffs for everything surrounding renewable energy?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're working on here at the UNFCCC. The feed-in tariff policy, as you say, is sort of the best policy to unleash the renewable energy development, to provide investment security. And this is sort of the flagship campaign of the World Future Council to help other countries to implement a similar policy. But for developing countries, it's still challenging to have such a policy because it still requires a little bit of a budget. So therefore, the Green Climate Fund that has been negotiated here is one source for this budget, and we're campaigning for that, the fact that this Green Climate Fund will be really coming up with 100 billion euros up from 2020, and we are suggesting to make use of a mechanism that has already proved successful, and that's the issuing of special drawing rights from the IMF.
Harry, does a company the size and scale of Philips, do you need incentives from government? Surely you're big enough already that you can implement any program you like without any help from anyone else.
I think as the saying goes, then if you want to move fast, you move alone, but if you want to move far ahead, then want to go far, you go together. So we certainly see that we need to move together. If you look at financing, let's just say two things, one on financing, one on policy measures. So we know that all energy efficient solutions, and certainly in lighting, are already economical. So we're not talking about a cost, but we're really talking about financing the initial investment or the initial renovation. So there are some public mechanisms for that, also public-private. We see more and more projects emerging. But also we as Philips have developed financing solutions for projects so that cities, building occupants, they no longer need to wait or have a hiccup in their budget. Which certainly today would be debated. So that is happening. But I think also beyond just financing those transitions, we need to move to a different way of budgeting. Because today we are very much focused on lowest initial costs. And we know that life cycle impact, not only in energy but also labor cost, is increasing rapidly into the future. So we also need to redesign the way we budget. So we need to take the life cycle impact into account in terms of energy, maintenance and so forth. And then we will more often take the right decisions. So one example there are cities. So cities quite often they have public procurement that is focused on buying the cheapest. Whereas we know if the policy measure would be green procurement, they would be taking the right decision at the start.
A politician's life cycle is often 4 years or maybe shorter. So how do you get around that? Because if they're just concerned about doing the best they can for 4 years, Stefan, how do you get around this life cycle issue?
Well, I think he mentioned really one of the key points, and that is looking into our cities and trying to transform our cities into sustainable systems. And the Future Council has called the vision, or has sort of formulated the vision of regenerative cities, and that goes beyond lighting, and that goes beyond cars and electric cars, and just building, new buildings and these kind of things. It goes beyond these things that we associate with cities nowadays, and we are suggesting to look at the whole life cycle, to the whole ecological rucksack, if you like, of all materials being used in cities, and trying to develop sustainable projects, sustainable ideas for transforming the city.
What cities and countries, you first, Harry? What cities and countries give you particular hope? Which governments particularly impress you in terms of their forward thinking in policy making and regulation?
I think there you see, and then in a way, when you look at the whole climate change debate, there's a lot of things to be concerned about. But one thing that is good news is the direction is the right one. So we are moving towards solutions, but we need more speed. We need more momentum. If you then look, countries that are clearly setting an example, I would say South Korea and China, because they see this as part of their future. They design, you could say, the blueprint going into the future. But also other cities in Europe, in the US and Latin America are taking action. One example that will be highlighted tonight in the Momentum for Change event headed by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and President Jacob Zuma is 10 projects will be highlighted in the plenary room, and one of them is a solar LED street lighting project in the city of Poyang. So where we, together with the Climate Group, who work with a range of cities, have implemented this technology, provides carbon energy savings, but most of all, it provides people space for social engagement, for going out, for economic activities. So there you see, again, the positive side of taking more action. And also another example of a city that will be multiplied, because the objective is to move this in the next 3 years to 400 cities, and then eventually to 1,000 within the next 5 years.
I think we also have a very, very good example in Europe, and that's the city of Barcelona, who has clearly set a target of 100% renewable energy within the next decades. And target setting for cities is absolute key to sort of streamline the governance structures and bring everyone behind this target, and explaining the public how to achieve this target and where are the huge benefits for the cities. And I personally have actually lived in Barcelona like 15 years ago, and when I now go to the city, it's just enormous how this city changed, and how sort of the built environment creates a really livable space for the people.
Interesting you mentioned Barcelona. What sparked that change in Barcelona? Was there a particular event that happened? I mean, we saw just yesterday in Beijing, they've had terrible smog, and the whole, I'm not sure any planes have been able to take off from the international airport because they've had this sort of pea green soup covering the whole city. But what sparked, as far as you know, this change in Barcelona?
Well, as I said, 15 years ago, I lived there, and I was probably the only cyclist 15 years ago. And it was really dangerous going by bicycle. I mean, this is just a minor example how the city changed. Now they have, they provide bicycles for almost everyone, and you can just use the bicycles for free. But this is just one example. The thing that impresses me even more is that it sets the target, and that it now is just in the process of designing the roadmap how to achieve this 100% target. And the city of Barcelona already came up with policies that oblige investors in buildings, for example, to use solar power, heat, and electricity. And that's just the way to go. We need policies on the city level that encourage and incentivize investors to go sustainable.
And Harry, I'd imagine you'd be delighted if perhaps the City of London said they wanted everyone to invest in LED lighting all around the city.
London is trialing out LED street lighting, and we are part of that trial, so together with the climate group. But there are also some other examples where you see behavior being copied and multiplied. So one is the city of Amsterdam embracing LED street lighting technology. And then recently the city of Tilburg in the south of Holland, 200,000 inhabitants, they've implemented what we call Lumimotion, so that LED street lighting that responds to cyclists, like Stefan, but also to traffic or people walking their dogs, so that a few light points ahead of you, the light turns up, and then when you pass by, then it dips down. So preserving the night, preserving energy, and doing the right thing. You see, other cities are copying this. They say, we want to have such a cool, livable city as Tilburg or as Amsterdam. So that's the good side of human behavior, that you can do the right thing and benefit, in this case, by improving the lives of your citizens. And a third example that I'd like to share is the city of Prague. Because the city of Prague has implemented a system that we call City Touch, and thereby the light points not only convert to LED street lighting, but they also get an IP address. So instead of cycling around to check at night what still works, you can just manage the whole lighting, but also measure if it really performs, do maintenance, do dimming when peak demand rises, from a dashboard in the city mayor's office. And those are really the advantages of modern technology. You see it play out in social benefits, and that is being copied, and at the same time you pocket the money savings and you pocket the carbon savings, of which we know that we need to achieve those.
So as much as we can be euphoric about things that are going on in much cities, or in some cities at least, we should make no mistake and say that national policy are absolutely required to reform our energy and to transform our society into sustainable society. So national policies and international agreements are still absolute key for helping cities then actually to implement the right decisions into the right direction.
We've only got a few minutes left, so let's just focus on some of those policies which could take industry and business forward in the next 10, 20 years. Starting with you, Harry, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about feed-in tariffs, the Green Climate Fund, technology mechanism, a price for carbon. What two policies would you like to see, not just out of COP17, but all across Europe and the world, implemented in order to help your business, not that Philips needs any help, but help your business and sort of drive the low-carbon economy?
I think that the policies that we needed, that are needed, and first of all, they should help citizens and society at large. But one of them is to further implement and embrace dynamic energy efficiency standards. In a way, you could say that old inefficient technologies, they are like candy. So when you eat a lot of candy, initially it tastes nice, but over time you face a hefty bill when you need to go to the dentist. The same is with old technologies. So the initial investment is lower, but over time, certainly with increasing energy prices, you pay a hefty bill. So when you make the right decision initially, you benefit. So what I mean to say, the policies need to take away the candy. So they need to take away the old technologies so that we can only take the right decisions. And the second policy that we need, policy framework, is that decision making, finance and procurement based on life cycle performance. So not just initial cost, how you look at total life cycle performance and make that a basis for decision making for buildings, for streets and so forth.
Well, I like to be a bit provocative, and I say forget about all these policies that we have just been hearing. Maybe even forget about feed-in tariffs, which I think is really the way to go for the development of renewable energy. if you remove all fossil subsidies that are still around the world, supporting the wrong technology into the wrong direction and helping still, increasing climate change and making it even worse. So if you overnight would remove this billions over billions of dollars still going into the oil and to the coal industry, the renewables would be already competitive, energy efficiency would be already very, very beneficial. So this is really the way to go.
Okay, that was very, very punchy. Final one to you both. And what, in terms of business, what would be a good decision at the end of COP17? What one policy from here would you like to see come out of the debate?
I think the one thing that I would like to see come out, so there are many bits and pieces that go eventually into a treaty, like a school diploma, but we're not yet there in the graduation year. But the one thing that I would like to see, and I see progress there, is that developed, emerging and developing countries start talking about a treaty or about all the things we need to do as an opportunity. So yes, the global threats are real, but when we start talking about an opportunity, how renovation of the existing infrastructure in developed countries provides green jobs and reductions of budget pressure, how emerging and developing countries are going to be enabled to explore a development pathway that improves their people's lives and creates prosperity. I think that I see as one of the key outcomes, that we start talking more and more about this as an opportunity, and then citizens will start grasping it and understanding it, because global generic threats are a bit difficult to understand. The tangible benefits, like the ones we spoke about, will result in voting and buying behavior. And that will then give the push in the back to politicians, and that will then reward those companies that have been investing in this, and then we get the momentum that we really need collectively.
And Stefan, I guess you'd agree with the idea that if we see this as an opportunity, that can only be positive.
Yes, it is a bunch of opportunities, and so I think I would agree to that point. But my personal mission here is really getting the Green Climate Fund up and running, and that's my main aim here. I'm a little bit humble and hoping for a legally binding agreement, which is absolutely necessary. But if you hear what's actually happening here, it's hard to believe in that at the moment. So I really think that this Green Climate Fund, which has been promised and where more than 150 countries have committed to in Cancun last year, that this is up and running, and that proposals like ours, like making use of the special drawing rights of the IMF for stuffing the Green Climate Fund, are actually being taken into consideration.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Harry Verhart from Philips and Stefan Schurig from the World Future Council, thank you very much. Thanks for having us. Thank you.